All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm really excited to get the opportunity to moderate this great panel about investment DAOs. I've had an opportunity to work across several DAOs with some of these really early builders and innovators. And so I'd love to just get the conversation started. Just hearing from Victor and Aaron about kind of their experiences with investment DAOs and maybe a brief intro. So Aaron, if you don't mind kicking us off, a brief intro about yourself and maybe just high level your experience in investment DAOs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Danny. Thanks so much for everybody in the panel. Hey, everybody. My name's Aaron Wright. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Tribute Labs. We've helped launch and support a network of 22 DAOs. I've just been in crypto for quite some time. Was fortunate enough to play a role to help launch Ethereum. Did a lot of early work around consensus with great projects like Chainlink and also a whole bunch of others that were very early in the space. Our DAOs are really focused on supporting different projects. We've, at this point, supported about 250 projects. They've also collected about 30,000 NFTs, and there's been about 85, almost 90,000 Ether that's been contributed across all the DAOs. It's been really great. They kind of run the gamut of the entire ecosystem. So we have DAOs that support companies, more like a venture-based DAO. We also have a bunch of DAOs that are focused on collecting different assets. So that could be things like Flamingo DAO, which collects fine art, and XX, which is a similar one. It could also be different DAOs that are focused on other verticals, from digital fashion to music to kind of runs the gamut. The way that we've kind of approached it is starting with much smaller groups that are more curated off the bat. These groups are making decisions in a very flat, non-hierarchical way. So there's nobody that's in charge, there's no committees. A lot of the kind of, I think, concepts and ideas around DAOs that we heard in the last wave, you're not going to really find them in our DAOs, and it seems to work pretty well. It's not perfect, and I'm sure we're going to talk about a bit about that. But DAOs are great. I think they're performing as well, if not better, than kind of expert-driven organizations. And I think what's really interesting is that they're all organized around topics instead of around experts or given personalities. And they're kind of lightweight ways to play around and support things that you're really interested in. So it's been a great experience. There's great people in all the DAOs, including Danny and Brian and Vanessa and the folks from Hydra. So it's a wonderful ecosystem. So jump on in.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Aaron. And I guess I've had the pleasure of participating and being active in a Tribute DAO, Ready Player DAO, and it really is. It's great to be building in the sandbox with innovative people that are all taking their swing at trying to coordinate through these new mechanisms and investment structures. And so I think maybe another kind of OG in the investment DAO world, Victor here from Metacartel. Victor, do you mind giving a quick intro and maybe a little bit about your experience here with venture DAOs?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Victor Rortvedt. I was one of the founding members of Metacartel Ventures in spring 2020. With the LAO, we were the two first legal entity for-profit DAOs that were operating in the space, and so I think we kind of were exploring some blue ocean kind of conditions. Metacartel Ventures was comprised of builders and some VCs and some funds. We were really trying to figure it out as we were going along. We were run by a Moloch contract. We had essentially like very flat governance rights, and we've deployed about $20 million in the last 3 years. We've had a chance to invest in about 75 different projects, and we figured out a lot of different ways to handle problems that arise inside of DAO organizations. Recently, I've also been part of the launch of a fund-of-funds DAO called Hydra that's designed to incubate and invest in other investment DAOs. We're trying some new experiments with incentives and design to help shape the investment DAO space, and I'm really pleased to be a part of the panel with everybody here.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Victor. I think maybe we can start just getting to the intros with some of these other panelists who I don't know as well as I do with Victor and Aaron, who I work with on a regular basis. So maybe Vanessa, do you mind maybe a brief intro and what's your exposure in venture DAOs and what's that been like for you?
Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Gurley. I am the general partner in an investment fund that invests in early stage Web3. We deploy across, pre-seed, seed, and Series A. And I'm personally involved in a lot of investment DAOs. So I'm part of Pleaser DAO. I'm going to join one of Aaron's DAO. And as an investor, I used to be at CoinFund, and we also invested in these DAO structures. So I personally invested in Aaron's company, and we invested in Syndicate, which is a company that allows you to spin out DAO infrastructure, and that allows you to create these investment clubs. And so it's really an exciting place for traditional investors, even though we're Web3 investors, to be part of those DAOs, either personally or as a fund, because we get to tap into the collective wisdom of the DAO members into what is new and coming, what are the new projects that are coming out there, and it allows us to also meet very early some entrepreneurs and have direct access.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like it's so important to have traditional members coming into Web3 and exploring what we're doing, whether that's on the coordination front or on the fractionalization. And so I'm curious, maybe before we move on, just to keep it kind of in the flow, what's your experience been like coming from a more traditional investing environment and kind of jumping in, it sounds like head first into these investment DAOs?
So I think when we invest out of the fund, we have really a clear investment thesis. We have clear target returns that we want to achieve, and sort of, we're looking at specific prices, et cetera. And I think in the DAO, you need to accept a lot of flexibility and a lot of more serendipity into that, because it's human coordination with really novel projects, and you don't really know what's going to come out of it. And it could work out really well, and it could be that the DAO repivots. So you need to be flexible enough to be able to invest there that it's outside your investment thesis, but you still trust the process that the outcome will be interesting for the fund.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think we'll kind of keep moving along here. David, why don't we go ahead and move to you? David's doing some really interesting stuff. He's summoning his first DAO, and we'd love to get an intro and to hear about what you're up to and your experience there.
Thanks, Danny. I actually can't hear a word anybody's saying. So I think I'd like to congratulate Victor for looking so great today. He's brought the whole panel fashion statement up a notch. So I'm here to talk about democratizing sport. Our first effort is in SailGP. We're bringing in 1,950 investors to become owner fans of the first professional sport team. We're doing it through a hybrid structure. We're using a tokenized LLC that's wrapped by a DAO for governance and engagement. And we hope to be on the water in June in Chicago for season 4 of SailGP's fourth season.
Yeah, that's great. It's so great to see all the innovation around how to best integrate Web3 coordination mechanisms like the DAO into more traditional business structures as we kind of try to bring DAOs into a more accessible framework for people to adopt. So I'm wondering if you can kind of give us your perspective as like a first-time summoner about what was it like for you, maybe some challenges, some good things, or...
Well, I think the first challenge is that a DAO in and of itself is a general partnership. So from a liability standpoint, you're not going to be able to have an equity investor want to take equity risk without limits to liability. So we had to bridge that gap by creating a tokenized LLC that's wrapped with a DAO for governance. So we had to create a hybrid structure that allows for equity limited liability, but still the engagement that a DAO provides with governance, with participation in the day-to-day ups and downs of sports team and fandom, sports team ownership and fandom. So we had to compromise to a certain degree to be legally compliant and bridge the investor community. Here we're raising $35 million, so there's a certain scale that we had to bridge, but still bring the benefit that Web3 can bring, which is transparency with on-chain decisions and governance. So that was really I think the innovation that we had to get to be able to do a scaled investment.
Yeah, it's so interesting because there's no real standard way to structure these vehicles just yet. There's so much exposure and risk and unknowns. And just on this panel, just from my experience, right, we've got Tribute that has their own framework, and they've run that playbook and improved it across 22 DAOs now. And then just with Victor, Metacartel, and Hydra Ventures, and that's a more master feeder fund-to-fund structure. And then we have a Wyoming hybrid structure. There's just those. I feel like that's a big surface area for making things hard and inaccessible, but almost like the necessary hard work to kind of dig through the mud. So I appreciate that. And lastly, but not least, we've got Brian over there. Brian, we've chatted briefly, but I don't know you too well, so I would love for you to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about your experience.
Thanks, Eddie. Brian, I've been a member of Tribute DAOs for going on 4 years now, beginning most notably with the Lao. So from the inside, I have a dev background, and I've also built some dApps in this space over the years, but my main focus is with the Laos and being as much of a contributor there. A note on how our process goes, it was very loose at first compared to what I imagine the traditional VC world, as you say, would be. So we really forge ahead and try as members to figure out these governance steps, and it's been very experimental. And but we end up sort of hammering out processes to make decisions better and faster as a group. So Aaron dubs it the hive mind coming together. Not only do we find the gems out there by putting our heads together, but we can come up with decent governance processes as well. It's surprisingly, because we're a disparate bunch coming from all different backgrounds, and it's. But I think that's a part of necessary. That diverse background group is what brings, the hive to the mind and that power. So there's power in that. Power to the DAO.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing that we've learned, and I'm glad to see that you're formed in Wyoming. I was helped out and drafted that bill, so I'm glad to see that happening. But I think the big thing, at least what we're learning with making investments together in a DAO structure, they can be flatter, they can be looser, and by organizing around a topic, you can build what we internally have been calling a hive mind with people with all these different backgrounds. They could be builders, developers, they could be enthusiasts about a particular topic, they could be traditional investors, but getting that mix together, you actually make better decisions. And actually operating at arm's length and not necessarily being in the same room, maybe not even knowing each other off the bat, you don't have the same groupthink that I think you see in, frankly, traditional venture capital. And you can move faster, right? Because you're doing it kind of part-time, you're using all these tools, you're able to kind of move at the speed of a blockchain. There's not necessarily a need to put together extensive deal memos, report back to LPs, because all the members have skin in the game, right? So there's not this moral hazard problem that we saw kind of manifest. And I think net, if it's done well, you have a group that's able to see around the bend faster and quicker and in a more agile way than a traditional structure, which kind of makes sense, right? Because we're mirroring out kind of the core logic of a blockchain. And a good example there, at least in our network, was Flamingo DAO, which was launched before really anybody was talking about NFTs. So that was a big wave. If you talked 2 years ago to all the folks at things like ETH Denver, they were super geeked on DeFi. They thought NFTs were dead, like a little tiny fad. But inside the Lao, there was a core group of people, and it wasn't everybody, right? So it's almost like a brain. There was a memory of this concept called an NFT, and some people still thought it was interesting. And there was enough people that wanted to scratch in there, so we were able to support great projects in their initial seed capital rounds, like Super Rare and Art Blocks, and you really kind of name it. And then that led into creating a new DAO called Flamingo that was able to support all these great, amazing artists and creators. And then it kind of has become a self-perpetuating ball until we're starting to see kind of gaming assets and gaming opportunities kind of emerge from that too. So kind of this organic growth and development is something that's really nice. And on top of that, it's a great way to meet people too. So most venture capitalists, I think, may not even be friends with their partners, but in a lot of these DAOs, you develop really close relationships because you're chatting it through a topic that you really all care about, which is kind of fun too.
I wanted to add something because traditional investment clubs have always existed. You get together with a couple of friends and you look at opportunities and then you decide to invest or not. You create SPVs. And DAOs are really different in terms of like your engagement and also what you get out of it, because you're not investing individually in each project. You've invested in the DAO, and the DAO invests for you. So you are incentivized to be really proactive and bring all those deals to the DAO, and that changes the dynamic compared to traditional investment clubs, I would say, where it's like one-on-one and it's more individualistic.
I hate the term investment club. I think it's offensive, right? I'm going to say something a little spicy. I think anybody that's called an investment DAO an investment club, they missed the mark. Like when I look at Metacartel Ventures and its members, like these are folks that have been in this ecosystem building, bleeding out, all the amazing parts of what we're building. They know 1,000 times more than any venture capitalist, a traditional venture capitalist. And it's the same in these DAOs. These are not clubs, right? These are people that are building and creating, and they're able to like actually see and know which project should be supported. Are they going to be right all the time? Absolutely not. But are they more right than wrong? The answer is yes, they are, right? And they're seeing it faster, they're seeing it better. And frankly, the return profiles are exceeding what you're going to see in most venture capital funds. So when you hear a VC talk about an investment club, what you should be really thinking is, holy shit, they're worried about their job. Because in reality, this is the model for the future, because it's meeting the internet kind of where it is, which is based on interest. It's having skin in the game. It's having people that are actually experts, not like a former product manager at Uber. And that's great that you're a former product manager at Uber, but what the fuck do you know about Web3? Like, what the fuck do you know about Ethereum? They don't. They just literally bought ETH 5 years ago, sat on it, watched it go up, and then claim that they're experts. They haven't done as much as many of the folks that are in these DAOs. So that, I hate the word investment club.
Yeah, no,
it triggered me.
Totally, no, I love it. I love the fire, and I want to hear from Victor about. I would love to hear kind of what you think about that comment that Aaron made about like the investment club. I'll give you a second here because I would like to like put a take here, and I love a few things that have come out of Aaron's mouth and from the panel so far. Specifically, the concept of like these super networks of people with diverse expertise rallying around a topic in an emergent space. I think that's a unique unlock, I think, and it comes with the ability to make really good investments in an area where information is extremely fragmented, difficult to find, and difficult to make decisions on. And so the DAO model on like the investment side of things, I think that's one of the best features of it, is kind of like this search engine of ideas towards like optimal decision making, I think, in specifically suited for this type of time. But that definitely comes with its challenges, right? But I think you see the successful groups are those super networks, like what Tribute Labs' network of DAOs. That's some of the best people in the entire space that have been here for a long time. Same with Metacartel. These are just original builders who have high context, high expertise. And so I'm wondering, I'll tee you up here, Victor, with maybe like if you have any responses or additions to the current conversation, or maybe if you can kind of talk about my comment, or maybe some of the challenges that you've kind of had to work through, and maybe that you're trying to solve now in your experience here with Metacartel and in investment DAOs.
Yeah, sure. No, I second everything that Aaron said. I mean, I think the notion that these are communities first, comprised of people that really do care about it, is a really huge asset to the space. You're seeing things, you're building it, you're sensing where the space is going. That's been a huge advantage. I do think that investment DAOs, as a DAO form, are really the tip of the spear for actually trying to figure out how best to use these new forms of human organization. If you would remember back to 2016, the DAO, one of the greatest black eyes in Ethereum history, was an investment DAO, or intended to be. I mean, they didn't actually make any investments, but there's something natural about people using pooled funds to make collective decisions using this tool set. And I think that there's a timeout on DAOs until we finally figured out how to reboot them in early 2020. But I think that there's something great about the notion that people have skin in the game when they join an investment DAO, and that they have a pretty clear mission, typically to make money, right? There's some other missions that are there, but at least you have something that's a North Star. And I think a lot of community DAOs, protocol DAOs, have more trouble because they can grow in different directions. They can have different priorities. They can have different sets of members come in, and either you see like attrition of interest and nobody's voting because nobody has skin in the game, or you see essentially capture by a loud group that wants to pull the protocol in a very specific direction. So investment DAOs at some level, because of those constraints of trying to make money and having skin in the game, like are really able to push forward these things. And one of the major things we've encountered over the last few years in Metacartel Ventures was free rider problem issues. So the way that we were set up, everybody contributed capital, and you got shares according to that capital. The work that was done to find deals, to do the due diligence on the deals, to do the portfolio support, to do internal ops within the DAO, there was nothing that was built into our original construct that actually would reward anybody for that. So we had to construct something that helped try to understand how to, if not punish free riders. I mean, we talked about the idea, should we just be purging people that aren't active? Should we be, giving people crazy bonuses? Should we be taking shares away? And we ended up settling on kind of a slow, steady dilution where inactive members lose out little by little every quarter by rewarding their shares to other members that contributed. But it's a really interesting space, and there wasn't anything that we could draw on as a corollary from traditional organizations. And there were mental models, but there wasn't a playbook for that. So it's been really fun to kind of just sense where the DAO was on that, kind of detect how much rage people felt about the free rider problem, and then try to come up with solutions that fit kind of a rough consensus for that. So that's one thing that I think I'm particularly proud of, and one of the things that we really kind of spent a lot of time working on inside of MCV.
That's awesome. Thank you. I feel like we've got some. There's a lot of how DAO. We all spend a lot of time solving like how do we DAO? How do we make it better every day? Because we find challenges, and that's like what we've committed to, because we're committed to the DAO as a social coordination mechanism that, when added to what we've already done, is superior for us, I think. And so it's I feel like I would love to hear like why DAO from maybe someone like David, because David, you this is your first one. I'm curious what made you want to jump into this kind of crazy world and add a DAO or a Web3 component to a more traditional thing like sports team ownership.
Yeah, the DAO structure, if you think about managing a distributed network of individuals around a common cause, the DAO structure is quite an efficient way to organize governance. And so we really got there from, how do you bring 1,950 people from all around the world on a common mission to operate a sports team, a business, and give people transparency with governance. So it was a very efficient way for us to figure out how to govern, how to create engagement, and how to give people a ownership stake that is separate in effect. When I say ownership, there's ownership of equity, but ownership from the mission. Mission ownership is critical to create that type of connection in fandom. And the DAO really actually allows us to give people voting rights, governance rights, participation, approval of budgets, approval of distribution of cash. And Victor and I talked about this. What do you ultimately do if you build cash in a business? And what do you do to distribute that? That's obviously an equity ownership issue, but it's also a mission ownership issue. Do you want to invest in another team? Do you want to reinvest in the business? The DAO structure allows disparate people from around the world to combine and execute in efficient fashion, as opposed to really the other mechanism is you're basically using email chains, right? But an on-chain system of governance allows a transparent mechanism that will ultimately allow token efficiency in trading and people having confidence in the business that the decisions are being made for the benefit of the mission and benefit of the ownership.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Thank you so much for that perspective. I would love not to just lob around like hot takes, and to put you on the spot. But Brian, I'm wondering if you have like a why DAO? Like maybe why do you think investment DAOs are important, or maybe a Web3 component?
Investment clubs.
Investment clubs, yeah.
I love them. I'm forming an investment club right after this.
Yeah. Why are investment clubs the future?
You know what? Right from where I stand, I mean, our roles as looking at investments is trying to figure out what is the future, what is the space, the future of the space. This is such a new form that's emerging and just taking off now, and much under the leadership of Aaron Wright and his team. It's been a great experience. Thanks to the OGs and the Metacartel for forging the way. What does it look like in 5 years? I have no idea. But I think we're going to come to find solutions to these hard problems at some point, whether it's like incentivization from within. That's a big nut to crack, but I think there's some people working on that that are coming up with interesting solutions. Think we'll see that come into play, and that'll be a big factor. And then we'll see how they interface with the real world, continue to put the rubber meeting the road kind of thing going forward, like with the legal wrappers that the lawyers get up to over here. That's the amazing work. So that's another big part of like making these actual recognized entities is a way to engage with the traditional world and the business world as it stands right now. And I think that's another key part of it going forward. So we'll see what happens. It's exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my 2 cents on why DAOs. And I think the real meta trend that's happening is we're just moving away from corporations, right? Corporations were invented for the industrial age. They were hierarchical ways to organize labor, to organize capital, and now we're edging, year by year deeper into the age of the internet, and the internet is not hierarchical. So DAOs just mirror and match how people are organizing their affairs online. And like we talked about before, the reason you're seeing a lot of traction around people working together to collect or invest, it's a clear objective. You can start these groups a little bit smaller, work out the kinks, and a little bit like how we scaled compute, I think over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to learn new things, new ways to coordinate people together, and these groups are going to scale out. And you're going to see larger and larger groups online, not just getting together to talk to one another, to advocate for a particular cause, but to start really flexing the muscle of the internet. And that is the meta trend. And it just happens to be starting with the original DAO experiment, just in its kind of revived form. And I think the original DAO experiment was actually quite hierarchical, right? And what we're instead seeing is an ecosystem approach to solving some of the same problems. But it's going to be a great thing, right? And all the early experiments we saw with other types of DAOs, like the ones that Seed Club were talking about before, or even things like Constitution DAO, I think that will eventually happen, but it's just a little bit 2 steps ahead, right? So we're going to be sitting here figuring out these hard problems. How do we get different people working together? How do we solve some of these governance and other mechanical pieces? And then they're going to scale up just like all of software. And in the process, it's going to change every single industry. Because sitting behind Hollywood, there is capital allocation. Sitting behind Wall Street, there's capital allocation. Sitting behind the music industry, there's capital allocation. Sitting behind the fashion industry, there's capital allocation. This is the engine that kind of fuels innovation, and we just have the best tools now. And what's great is that markets tend to be efficient, and efficient markets win in the end. So stay tuned for the next panel next year, right?
I just want to add, I agree with absolutely everything you said, and I just want to add my own personal one more component to it, which is that like being in DAOs is fun. It's a great way. The people that you mentioned earlier, the fact that you're encountering new challenges, the fact that there's new technology, you're hearing from new people, you're constantly like wrangling with new issues, you're solving internal incentive and organization issues, and I think that's it's really compelling. So if you are thinking of joining a DAO and you're not certain, go and find out, and it's really interesting stuff, and you really enjoy the time you spend there because of the way that you're engaging different parts of your brain. There's a lot of cool incentives, but yeah, I think there's definitely an internal satisfaction that comes from being in a DAO that for me is different from being part of more traditional organizations.
Yeah, it's great.
Totally. Well, hey, look, I think I'm getting a side eye here from the organizer, and we're definitely over. I could talk about this forever. I got tapped in here last minute to just moderate, and I wouldn't miss this. This is a great conversation. Some of the most incredible people in the space that I've ever worked with, watching them do what they're doing and being part of it, as we all do our part to kind of express our vision. It's great. It's very encouraging, and I'm excited to see what everyone's doing. So thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for having us.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.